Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Success is a Choice podcasting network. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler, and today we have a great guest as usual. But before we get into our discussion today and our guest, I want to remind you that today's episode is made possible by freeleadershipworkshop.com. Freeleadershipworkshop.com. Culture, leadership, teamwork, captain stuff, success, you name it. We have webinars, free virtual live sessions that you can learn more and more about being a leader, about being successful. Check all of those out at freeleadershipworkshop.com. Today's guest joining us is a NASCAR expert. And if you are watching this live on Rumble, on YouTube, you're listening to this on the Success is a Choice podcasting network here before February 18th, Daytona is coming up. Daytona, the big Super Bowl of NASCAR racing, but it's kind of the Super Bowl. It's at the start of the season, but we have a NASCAR expert, Ryan Stevens from Win the Race, WinTheRace.info on the internet. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Jamie, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate this. I love everything you're tweeting out and the whole channel, positivity, the good messages. I love it. Teamwork is something that, I always say, growing up, like one of the most important things to me looking back was, Pop Warner football. I remember a lot of what my coaches said, and I think it taught me a lot about discipline, and I try to apply that in everyday life and teach my kids the same thing. So I don't know. What you tweet out really strikes home with me. So I appreciate it.
I really appreciate those kind words. And, we typically don't date these podcast episodes. We typically they're very evergreen, but we will be talking about the Daytona 500, which is coming up, but also, dating this further, my condolences to you on the San Francisco 49ers coming up short in the Super Bowl. I know you're a huge 49ers fan. As a lifetime lovable loser Lions fan that I am, I would just love to get to the Super Bowl and lose a few times myself.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I actually tweeted out a poll too. I was like, what's worse, never getting to the Super Bowl or now continually, losing Super Bowls? And it was pretty dead even, but I guess I have to be glad that the team is good enough to get there. It was a cool group of guys to watch all year. I am sorry they beat your Lions to get there, but that was a heck of a game too. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully we're both back in the same position next year. It'll be a lot of fun.
It would be nice. They used to have Jim Harbaugh there as coach, and he's a Michigan guy. So a lot of Lions fans like Jim Harbaugh. We kind of like the 49ers in a way because of all those years of Harbaugh coaching there. But they also have Jake Moody, the rookie kicker, who was a University of Michigan standout as a kicker. So, if we're going to see the Lions lose to somebody, I guess, we'd like it to be to someone that has some Michigan ties. So Jake Moody, and for about a minute there, he had the all-time field goal record in the Super Bowl.
I feel bad for him. Sets the record. That was very short-lived, but great, good kick. Good for him.
Yeah,
he had a decent year. Had a couple tough misses, but overall, I think it's something he can improve on, and I'm okay with him as our kicker. A lot of teams don't have that. Their kicker goes out there and they're like, oh no, but I feel all right with Moody.
Well, and you mentioned Detroit. Detroit had that situation. I know there was a lot of controversy about, they went for it on fourth down 3 different times. Well, if you kick any of those field goals, in theory, you win the game. But what people don't realize is that Detroit kicker was cut during the summer, and he
Yeah.
only came back, toward the end of the season or the middle of the season. He was not a very reliable kicker for the Lions. And so, the kicking game in the NFL, especially, it's one of those where you expect it to go in. You have one job to do, which I think there's more to it than that a lot of times.
Yeah.
But as a fan, hey, you got one job to do. Why can't you kick the field goal? And so there's a lot of pressure on those kickers. But Jake Moody definitely, it's funny how for 30 years, the record stood. Steve Christie had the longest field goal in Super Bowl history for 30 years, and then it's broken twice in the same game.
Yeah. That's nuts.
Well, Super Bowl in the past, once again, at least your 49ers got there. But NASCAR coming up, you mentioned teamwork with our tweets. You love the teamwork aspect. Football is one of the greatest team sports there is out there. But one of the maybe underrated team sports is NASCAR. And not everybody watching this or listening to this is a NASCAR fan or understands NASCAR. Hey, the driver makes the car go fast, end of story. But there's a lot of teamwork to NASCAR. Clue us in, take us behind the scenes a little bit, behind the curtain, to why teamwork is so important in NASCAR.
Yeah, I mean, and especially leading into the Daytona 500, which is a race, for your listeners that aren't familiar with it, it's a race where the cars are kind of limited as far as power, and all the cars race in a pack, and they have to push each other and move together. So you'll find a lot of these teams work together and push each other toward the front. Um, Beyond that, in a NASCAR race, you have a pit crew, which is a major part of your team. And if you're making green flag pit stops, you need them to be just as fast as you've been, so you can get out there and maintain your position or even gain a position if you're faster than another team. There's, going back to Daytona, but every race, there's a spotter, sitting up high, watching everything on the track, telling their drivers when to move up or down, or if they're clear, in front of the car that's behind them, so they can, not get wiped out by them when they make their move. And that's a huge thing at Daytona. So you just have to have this trust and relationship with your spotter, your team, your pit crew's always grinding. I mean, the practice, if anyone hasn't watched it, the new series on Netflix is a great quick series to buzz right through, but it shows you a little bit, more about the pit crew and how they practice and things like that. It's very interesting. And I tell all my friends, NASCAR isn't just, guys turning left. That's the main thing. It's super boring. Everyone thinks it's nap time. If you really watch it and you really learn it and learn about the teamwork involved, it's much, much more fun to watch, much more involved. And you'll find that you don't even need a favorite driver. You might even want a favorite team and you root for that team, which is kind of cool.
So a lot of the people watching this, listening to this, maybe their only NASCAR exposure is Ricky Bobby and Talladega
Yeah.
Nights. So, if you're not first, you're last. What did that movie get right? What did that movie get wrong?
Maybe the only thing they got right is the raw emotion involved when you don't win. But yeah, I guess whatever age group you're in, it could be Talladega Nights. People could know, Cole Trickle. Days of Thunder was like when I was a kid, that was the big one.
Rubbin's Racing.
And that got a lot wrong too. But you know, yeah, I like Days of Thunder more than Talladega Nights. I'll just say that. I just enjoyed it more. But Talladega Nights is its own, that's a comedy, so it's different. But yeah, I don't know. They didn't get much right in those. I would watch the Netflix series. You'll learn a lot more about it.
Well, in NASCAR, a lot of times, we talk about, and Ricky Bobby, Talladega Nights, talk about if you're not first, you're last. Is that a very good strategy in today's NASCAR, or is it consistency? What are the drivers? Obviously, you want to win as many races as you can, but is that a good strategy? Clue us in on that. How does, not necessarily get in the weeds of how the point system works, but are you better off finishing top 5 every week, or winning a race wrecking? Clue us in on that, how that works in NASCAR.
Consistency is key until you get to the end of the regular season, because the way the point system works is there's only 16 drivers that are going to make the playoffs. if you win, you're in. So it would depend on how many different, a couple of years ago, we had a ton of different drivers win to get in. So when it got to the end of the year, there was maybe one or two guys that could win and get in. Everyone else was fighting for points for that last spot. So consistency is key. Short answer, just because you'd be high up in the points, be hard for people to pass you in a typical year. There's not enough winners to where you would need a win to get in. You can point yourself in there. So if you're consistent, you're not wrecking out of races or making mistakes, in the pits, like we talked about. There's penalties you can get, things like that, that'll send you to the back. You'll lose those points. So yeah, I would much prefer to be consistent. I think you'd make the playoffs, and then once you hit the playoffs, now you're looking to be a little more aggressive.
So how did you get into loving NASCAR?
My grandfather was super into it. Big Dale Earnhardt Senior fan. And when I used to go over to their house, he would, similar to how many people watch football, and I just say that because it's, obviously the biggest sport there is, where you block out that, 3.5 hours on a Sunday to watch your favorite team. That's how he is with a race, or was with a race. So that, kind of got me into it. We went down to Charlotte, watched a race. That was awesome. Um, and I was younger then, but I was into it. We played a fantasy league, had to write down your picks, mail it to his friend in Florida. He manually tracked all the stats and then would email back or mail back what the standings were and everything written on a piece of paper. So it was pretty old school, but it was fun. And when you're watching a race and you know what drivers you picked, which is kind of, I play DFS and gamble on it now, you're watching, pretty intensely. Um, and that was at, I don't know, 10 years old, we started doing that. When I got into my 20s, I didn't follow NASCAR as much. I just had other stuff going on. But then when DFS and betting came around, DFS mainly, that got me, hooked again. And I don't have a favorite driver right now. I'm really just rooting for where the money's going. So
Well, in DFS, for those people that aren't familiar, it's daily fantasy sports. So it's like the fantasy sports you might have played with football, where you have a season long fantasy sports. But daily fantasy sports is each week you can have a different, in football, different team, different players. In NASCAR, it's different drivers each week, and you're putting together the best team each week or each day. But we will get into that in just a few minutes and talk about Ryan's uh, business and his site that he started. That's great for fantasy sports, for betting, and just for NASCAR fans in general. But you mentioned that you don't have a favorite driver, mainly because you do so much betting and gambling and daily fantasy sports on that. But as people will watch a race, let's take the casual fan who maybe doesn't have a favorite driver either. They turn on this race, let's say Daytona coming up this weekend, or any other race that they turn on. It seems like it's a long race. It's like 3 hours. It seems like it's the same thing over and over and over again. Like you mentioned, they're just turning left all the time. Are there some tips maybe you would give the casual fan for watching? And sometimes we hear like the announcers say, well, the number 48 car, or the number 27 car, why don't they use their actual names?
now that I don't know. That's a lot of NASCAR fans don't like when media guys just tweet out numbers too, like, oh, 47 in the wall, 20, or they'll do the starting lineup and it's just 10 numbers in a row. It's like, I don't know. It's quicker to type it out, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. That one I can't answer. But to help watch a race, I think, is like going back to that team aspect. Why don't you could pick a team, track how they're doing. If you go, a lot of people won't, but you can go to a race, or you can go on the app and you can listen to different radios. That, I think, makes it much more interesting because you're getting into the strategy part of it. So if you go to a track where there's a lot of tire wear, and the tires are going to wear down, it slows your car way down. There's a lot more pit stops there, and teams will use different strategies to try and you know make the stops at the right time in order to make the passes at the right time, so they can say, hey, if we pit here, maybe we can catch him on lap such and such. That's when it gets more interesting, and you can track your guys and see if their strategy is correct, if they're going to be moving up as the race goes on, things like that. I just think focusing on the team aspect of it makes it more interesting.
You mentioned at Daytona, and there's some other tracks like this where I believe you said the restrictor plates or most of the cars are kind of running at the same speed. Why is that something that they've done? I grew up going to Michigan International Speedway, the 2 mile oval, and they just seemed to open it up, and it was great racing for me. But yeah, I was a younger kid at that time. Why? What is this? What is this that they're doing with making the cars go all the same speed? Why are they doing it?
Just to put more in control, more in the driver's hands, I think, and then to give it a little more parity. Like I said, a couple years ago, you had a lot of different winners. Um, some people don't like this at all. Others like it because now maybe your favorite driver has a chance to win more often. Which that part of it's pretty cool. It was cool to see a guy like Chris Buescher win. What, 3 races last year or something. He hadn't in so long before that. It's just kind of incredible to see. And you see new teams emerging. So this is a cool thing too. Is like, I don't know if you heard of Trackhouse as a team. Pitbull is one of the co-owners of that team. So there's some different money coming into it. Denny Hamlin is will be a Hall of Fame NASCAR driver. He owns a team with Michael Jordan called 23XI. That's really cool. So I don't know if this is really kind of swaying away from the question that you asked, but it's just like that's also making things more competitive as well, is that you have some more money coming into it and teams that can compete with the bigger teams. Now 23XI has two really fast cars and they can compete with the Hendricks and Penske and all these big names that people have heard forever, where Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson raced with Hendricks, and Penske's had Joey Logano forever, and Brad Keselowski used to be there. I mean, these are big names. Now there's newer teams and Trackhouse and 23XI that can compete with them. So it's really cool to have more competitive cars in the field, in my opinion. So,
Well, growing up long, long time ago, back in the day, as my son would say, my dad was a firefighter, and he would go take a fire crew down to Michigan International Speedway and set up at a turn. But it was when racing wasn't as big of a deal as it is now. And so he got to even know the owner of the track, which at the time was Roger Penske. And he loved Roger Penske. Roger Penske treated everybody he met like he was a friend. And to this day, even when I would move, I was a college basketball coach. I would move a lot as a college basketball coach. We would always use Penske trucks just because Roger Penske was nice to my dad when
nice.
he would be on the fire crew at MIS. But when you have these cars going all kind of at the same speed, it bunches them up, right? There's pack racing, and that allows for maybe more carnage, more chaos sometimes at the bigger speedways like Daytona coming up.
Yeah, I think for the casual fan, it makes it more fun. So they're really only doing this for Daytona, Talladega, and Atlanta. So it'd be 6 total races during the year. And Atlanta, is a new one. As a couple years ago, they redid the track a little bit, and now they've run it as a, quote unquote drafting track. So that added 2 more races onto the schedule where they're going to be kind of jumbled up together. Um, I know just from like talking to my dad, even who's not a big NASCAR fan, that he enjoys watching it more. So I know the casual fan enjoys, you know, that the fact that one guy can touch another guy up front and it can wipe out 20 cars behind them. Just makes it a little more exciting. You watch the race a little more on the edge of your seat.
Well, even my wife last year, she came in to the living room, and I wasn't watching the race, all day long, but she comes in the living room. She's like, how are they driving so close to each other? Like they're
Yeah.
all right together. And if you've ever driven on a freeway, I mean, just the casual driver at 70 miles an hour, it can be kind of nerve wracking, but to be driving at 200 plus miles an hour with all those people together, there's no doubt that once in a while you have some carnage.
Yeah. On NASCAR's main account on X yesterday, they tweeted out about a 1 minute long video, but it shows on car cameras, and it also has the audio from spotters telling guys where to go, move up or down, and if they're clear or not from the cars in front or behind them. And it's pretty incredible for anyone that has, Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it nowadays. If you go to NASCAR's main account, There's about a minute long video yesterday, and you watch that. It's, to me, I mean, I know I like NASCAR, love it, but if you watch that 1 minute video, it's hard not to get hooked on just how crazy it can be there
And
and
as
how
a
talented these guys are.
And as a reminder, you can follow Ryan in his NASCAR site at Win the Race P1, Win the Race P1 on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Win the Race P1. So we've got Daytona coming up. It's kind of the Super Bowl. It's the race that most people have heard of outside of Talladega, because Talladega Nights, they made a movie about it. But the Daytona 500, kind of the Super Bowl at the start of the year, it kicks the season off. Are there some racers that we should be watching for? Are there some things we should be watching for? Do you have, we don't want to take all your thunder away from your paid subscribers and the people that are getting all your expert advice, but if we want to place a casual bet this weekend, or is there a casual bet that's going to win us all the money or make us rich, or is there a safe bet or a safe um, thing that we can tell all of our buddies so that we look smarter than they are?
Not so. That's the beauty of this race, is there are no safe bets. This, because one guy up front can make a wrong move and wipe out 20 cars behind him. But that's, you don't, there is no safe bet. But the good part about it is it makes it a fun race to bet, because the odds are a little longer, because it's unpredictable. I think no one's under 10-1 to win. So, and then it goes all the way up to 100-1. So you can sprinkle a little bit of money on some more drivers if you want to just crack a beer, have fun, watch the race, and hopefully your driver, one of them, survives and you can get to victory lane. So it's definitely, even people who bet professionally, I know a couple of them, they don't, NASCAR at least, they don't bet this race, or if they do it just like I'm going to do it. They'll sprinkle a little bit, crack open some beers, and just hope that they survive and you win. And that's my best advice to people, is take it easy these first 2 weeks, and then once we hit Las Vegas in week 3, that's when we get to business.
All right. All right. So, but definitely not for the casual fan or someone like me that just doesn't know many drivers, but I grew up liking race cars and going to races. Probably don't want to bet Cale Yarborough or Darrell Waltrip. They're probably not going to win this week.
No, definitely not.
No,
So there's duels on Thursday night, which will be 2 races that decide the final 6 spots or 4 spots for the Daytona 500 lineup. So there's 6 total open entries. 4 of them will make it. 36 are locked in. 40 total drivers. So Thursday night we'll learn a lot. There's new bodies on the Ford cars and the Toyota cars. Chevys remain the same. Fords last year absolutely dominated this type of race. They could link up better than anybody, push each other better than anyone, always ran up front. Now they changed their body style a little bit to what they say might give up a little bit on these races to gain more on the other races, because there's more of them. Toyota switched their body a little bit, and now it's a little flatter on the front. Perhaps they can push each other better and work better as a team. So we'll learn a lot Thursday night, and then probably place a few crazy bets for Sunday just to have some fun. But Thursday night would be very important to watch.
So if somebody watched the Netflix series about F1, Formula One racing, those drivers saw that racing, obviously those cars are much different than a NASCAR. But is the racing, other than obviously you're going right, you're going left, doing that kind of stuff, is there much difference other than the rights and the lefts? Is racing still the same team aspect, the same, you got to be focused on stuff, you've got to anticipate, or is there much of a difference between those cars or
Big
the
difference.
racing?
There'd be a big difference. One cool thing this year is Kyle Larson, probably one of the biggest names in NASCAR, might be the most talented. The kid's unreal. He wins races in all different series across the country, but he's going to race in IndyCar this year in the Indy 500. So I'm real curious to see how he translates over into that car. Jimmy Johnson tried it. Wasn't great, wasn't terrible, but Kyle Larson, I think, is just like, he's in his prime right now. Jimmy Johnson did it when he was older. Kyle, and Jimmy Johnson didn't travel around and win these races like Kyle Larson's doing everywhere. Like this kid, whether it's on dirt, on asphalt, wherever, he's just a stud. So I'm real curious to see if he can just hop behind that wheel and wheel it for the Indy 500. It'll be it'll be awesome if he does well. But I don't know. I think that it's so different. I also wouldn't be surprised if he struggles.
Well, NASCAR began, or a lot of it began, almost with back in the day of the moonshine runners and trying to outrun police they grew up in the backwoods or, on dirt tracks and that kind of stuff. Are a lot of these drivers coming up the dirt track route, or are they coming up more, they have a lot more privilege, or they have a lot more things handed to them, or they have a lot more resources available to them? Or are you still seeing a lot of these drivers coming up through the ranks, old school mentality, the Rubbins racing type stuff where they're coming up, taking chances, back roads, dirt tracks, that kind of stuff?
I think you still see a mix of both. There's still some guys in there that are in there. I think, and well, I know some of them are due because of their family. Um, if it was solely based on talent, I don't think all of them would be in the position that they're in. Um, but like many things in life, it's all about who you know, and they're in there right now. But I think we've seen a couple very talented drivers coming up through the system here. I love the Xfinity and Truck Series, which for people that aren't familiar with it, it's basically like the minor leagues, like AAA, AA, I guess, to baseball. These guys can work up through trucks and Xfinity and earn a cup ride which would be the major leagues. Um, those two series right now, I think, are loaded with talent. So when these opportunities arise, I think we're going to get some very talented drivers and some very fast cars. It'd be pretty cool. And a lot of them aren't, relatives or things that are handed to them. They're gonna earn it and earn their ride in Cup Series, and I think that's a pretty exciting time to be in right now.
Well, you founded the company Win the Race. You have a great website. You can use it for gambling. You've won your members a lot of money. They've been able to win a lot of money with your information. You give some picks, but it's more, you're teaching them. You're giving them information to make their own decisions. Almost the old analogy, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a meal, you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. That's kind of what you're doing with your site. You mentioned tire wear earlier. That's just one of the things you have on your site. You have all these things on your site. So if you're a big NASCAR nerd and you want to know all the times of the pit crews and tire wear, all that stuff, you can get into that. If you just want a little overview, you can get into that as well. Why did you start this site? And give us kind of a 30,000 foot view. I know I just kind of talked about it a little bit, but why'd you start this site? And give us kind of an overview of maybe something I didn't say to promote your site.
Really, when I started getting into DFS more for NASCAR more seriously, I would go to certain sites and pick something out here or there from each one and kind of compile my own spreadsheet with what I thought was most important everywhere. And then I learned more about the data that NASCAR, spits out after a race, and then kind of figured out what I thought was most important myself. And then so when I built my site, I wanted it to be a basically just one centralized location for all the stuff that I used to go around everywhere looking for. So everyone can just log in, have it immediately. There might be 4 or 5 different tabs you need to click, but it's all on the same site. Most of the stuff you can download to a CSV and create your own thing with it or whatever you want to do. And that's the thing. And that's the beauty of it is you can log in 20 minutes before a race and hopefully have everything you need to make a lineup quick or to place a couple bets. Or you can start on Monday with me when I place, I start doing out with the pre-practice and qualifying ranks every Monday. You can start there and build your own model from there through the weekend with everything that comes out throughout the week. We have Greg Mathern is our betting expert. He does front runners, which is, how often a driver's running in the top 10, 5, or 3. That's super important. That comes out midweek. And then we have Joe Schroeder's Sim Center, which is 10,000 plus race simulations and that's placed against all of the, betting books, and it's our own probability of things happening, wins, top tens, all that stuff, everything a book's going to offer, and puts it against the book's number and tells you what the, most plus EV or best bet is that you should make based on our simulations. So it's as extensive as you want to get. You can log in 20 minutes before a race, have what you need, or you can just go to town on everything on there.
Well, I am a subscriber. I'm a member. I can vouch for it. And I would be one of the casuals. I would be one of the people that sees all the great things that you have there and just amazed at how smart you guys are. Uh, I don't get in the weeds too much. I'm a pretty simple guy, but if for the people that want to get in the weeds and be very technical about stuff, I think it gives you an edge when you are placing those bets. Now, maybe not this week for the Daytona 500, as you mentioned, and even for you, you're going lighter on your bets. You're going lighter on the amount of money maybe that you're playing this week because it is kind of a crapshoot. But as you think about this year, looking out for the year, is there a driver that I ask you two drivers? One is I'll ask you three drivers. One is I want your disappointing driver of the year. So someone that probably is expected to be good, but maybe you don't think is going to be as good. One is a surprise driver, and then I want to know who should we bet on to win the NASCAR championship at the end? Who's going to be the final one standing? So your disappointment, your surprise, and your champion.
Okay. Well, I'll start with my champion. My champion would be Denny Hamlin. I think he finally does it. He hasn't won a championship yet, but he's got over 50 wins. He's a Hall of Famer. Guy is just unreal talented. And even if if you know NASCAR like me, you already know it. But if you watch the documentary on Netflix, you just see how hard he works. He's always in a simulator trying to learn more things and get better, even at the age that he's at right now. When you're in his 40s racing a NASCAR every weekend. It's crazy. So I think he can finally get it done this year. This probably won't be a popular choice, but I think a disappointing year just because he won the championship last year would be Ryan Blaney. I think he'll have a fine year, but I kind of like Joey Logano to bounce back in that on that Penske team. And I just, and I think if that's going to happen, then that'll leave Blaney getting eliminated earlier in the playoffs than last year, which I'm sure, his team would say is obviously a disappointment after winning it all last year. A surprise driver, I don't know if it would really surprise people. I'll go with a long shot surprise driver because I think there's enough tracks where he could excel at. And he took over for a great team, Kevin Harvick's ride, but Josh Berry is a rookie. And I think there's, on some short tracks, I wouldn't be surprised if he was, running top 10 a lot or top 5. But if they are smart this year, they're gonna score some points. So I think that's a longer shot to do really well. Another one that I like, but he's more well known, would be Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick's one that's improved every single year. He's on that 23XI team I talked about earlier, owned by Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan. He made it real far into the playoffs last year. I think he will again this year. His best races are road courses, and there's a few less this year, but he's also improved elsewhere, especially on like the shorter flat tracks. I think he can if he can just get lucky on these drafting tracks. I mean, he just wrecks out all the time. But a lot of times sometimes it's his fault, sometimes it's not. But if he can score a few more points there, I think he'll be very comfortable this year and have another really strong year. And you get to the playoffs again, anything can happen. I think that car could be really strong and really fast, especially with Denny as an owner. What if something happens to Denny and he's out of it or something? I mean, all the resources should go to his team and just any knowledge or tips he can give them to make that car a little faster. I really like Tyler Reddick this year.
Well, we have a lot of basketball coaches that watch this, that listen to this show. And so, anytime you're talking about Jordan Brand, that's a great team to root for. So Denny Hamlin, Tyler Reddick, they're the Michael Jordan team. So I guess that's who we're going to root for if we're casual fans. So and
Reddick always has the best looking cars too. The Jordan wrapped cars always look the best.
Yeah, we got to go for that, especially if we're basketball coaches. But the Jordan Brand just won the national championship in football with the Michigan Wolverines. So maybe this is
Yeah.
the year for the Jordan Brand there. We'll get you out on this last question. As sometimes as golfers, us that bet on golf or love golf, we'll go out there, we'll get out on the course and we hit it into the woods, and then we try to be like Tiger Woods or try to be like Rory McIlroy or something, and we've seen them hit this shot out of the woods, and so we're going to try this as well because we've seen it so many times. When you get behind the wheel and your wife is sitting next to you and you get out there on the freeway, is she just shaking your head sometimes because you're like, oh, I can make it between those two cars there? Or, hey,
Yeah.
you might want to slow down a little bit because I don't think they're going to not give you a speeding ticket because you're a NASCAR expert.
Yeah, I'll say she definitely prefers to drive anytime we go anywhere. And not just because I'm out there being a crazy person, but definitely a little more aggressive. And yeah, maybe I think I've learned a little something from these guys, even though if I stepped in their car, I couldn't make a lap around the track. So
Well, he's Ryan Stevens, WinTheRace.info, WinTheRace.info. Go check their site out. And if you want to get into the world of gambling or fantasy sports when it comes to NASCAR, or if you're just a huge NASCAR fan or a NASCAR fan and you want to give them a little bit of edge when they're watching that on Sunday afternoons, that might be a great subscription to get them, because all that tire wear or how they do when they're leading in front and all that gobbledygook, uh, all that technical sciencey type stuff. You might have a NASCAR fan that in your life that likes that kind of stuff. Go out and get it. It's very affordable. WinTheRace.info. Ryan Stevens, appreciate you joining us. And for everybody else watching this live, watching this on replay, listening to this on your favorite platform as well, we appreciate it. Share this show with a friend. Go ahead and smash that like button or just tap it if you don't want to break your screen. But until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?